Okay, so good morning. I see that there are many still joining us, but in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. I am Evie Lindquist from the Training and Technical Assistance Center at the Early Childhood Investment Corporation. We are so excited to offer today's webinar in partnership with the Infant Mental Health Team from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you all for joining us today. For a very important conversation about how to support and make the connection between racial identity and the social emotional health of infants and young children. As we get started, just a couple of housekeeping reminders. So we have a very dynamic panel of presenters for you today, and they really want you to be part of this conversation. You will have lots of opportunities to actively participate throughout the presentation. You may share your thoughts, pose and answer questions in the chat box. You can also give the presenters some feedback by sharing a reaction, such as a thumbs up. Both the chat box and the reaction features are located in your meeting controls. Thank you for sharing your webcams. This is an important way to build connection and understanding. So if you are able to keep your webcams on, please do so throughout the meeting. And as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, so please remember to stay on mute. It just helps to limit some of that background noise and potential distractions. Lastly, if you have any tech issues, I am here to help you work through those. So please send me a private chat if you are experiencing any difficulties at any time with being able to participate in the presentation. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jennifer Roundtree, who is going to explain how you are able to get training credit for today's participation. Jennifer?
Thanks, Evie. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jennifer Roundtree with ECIC, and I am here to give you a little bit of information about how your training credit might look. For those of you that have accounts within the Michigan Registry, within 3 to 5 business days, you will be getting credit granted through the registry for your training hours today. And so we are really trying to utilize the statewide system for professional development and have this event in the registry for all of you. If you aren't sure if you have an account or if you might be interested, just feel free to put your name in the chat and we'll be able to collect those, and I can follow up and send you some information about the Michigan Registry if you'd like to learn more. So I'm happy to follow up for those of you that might have questions, but those of you in the registry, that's how you'll get your training credit today. So now I get the distinct pleasure of introducing one of our trainers speakers today. So Evie's gonna move the slide forward so we can see Megan's lovely, there we go. Well, that's not Megan, but that's the introduction slide. So yeah, so I am thrilled to welcome Meghan Schmelzer and her team of social and emotional consultants. She'll introduce all of them, but first I just wanna let you all know some wonderful things here about Megan. She is the Early Childhood Mental Health Coordinator for the Division of Mental Health Services to Children and Families, Behavioral Health, and Developmental Disability Administration at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And in this role, Megan oversees Michigan's Infant Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation Program, which is also known as Social and Emotional Consultation. Additionally, Megan serves on many interagency groups promoting the mental health of infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and their families. Megan began her career as an infant mental health home-based clinician and coordinator in Genesee County. So those of you from Genesee County, she is from your neck of the woods. She is still very dedicated to integrating the principles and practices of infant mental health into Michigan's early childhood systems work, and I know that from firsthand, getting the pleasure to work with her. Megan currently serves as a liaison on the board of directors for the Michigan Association of Infant Mental Health, also known as MIAME, from MDHHS. She serves on this role, and she's also the co-chair of the chapter membership committee for MIAME. So please help me in welcoming. You can use some of your emoji reactions to give a warm welcome to Meghan Schmelzer. I'm going to turn it over to her. So welcome, Megan.
Thanks, Jennifer. That was so great. I wasn't anticipating all of that. And I'm just so delighted to be here with all of you. And I'm just going to keep scrolling as I'm talking to see all of your faces and some names and faces that I've known and those that we haven't yet met. Of course, we would have loved to have done this in person, and hopefully someday we will be able to. But we're just delighted that all of you have signed up and joined with us this morning to start this conversation. So Jennifer already took care of my introduction. I'll also add that I am a mother of 3 little kids and a wife, and so I just can commiserate with all of you who have similar responsibilities at home in this crazy environment that we're all in. So again, sometimes just showing up today is a win, so we appreciate that. In just a minute, I will have each of our 3 social emotional consultants do a brief introduction of themselves, and then we'll start with a poll just to see who's in our virtual room here. Again, if we were in person, it would look a little bit different, but it's important for us to know who's with us today. So for those who might not be familiar about our social emotional consultation team, again, it is my great honor to help support this team throughout the state of Michigan. We have 12 consultants right now, and they, again, are known as social and emotional consultants locally. They cover 18 counties, and it is our work to get this, to have this grow even more. We've been working on that behind the scenes for a long time now, but suffice to say, right now we cover 18 counties, and our team, they do amazing work with child care providers and families to help support the social emotional health and mental health quality of overall care that they provide to little ones and their families. And a big part of that is helping to build reflective capacity. And really what that means is helping people think in different ways and expand their thinking about how what they bring to the table in their relationship, how that impacts the social emotional health of the adults and kids and families that they work with. And one way to do that is to talk about some potentially difficult topics, such as we're going to be doing today. So before we go any further, Rachel and Hannah and Amber, we will have you do a brief introduction, and then again, we'll start the poll. So Rachel, you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. We're so excited to be here with you today. And as Megan has said, we would have been delighted to be able to present this in person, but given all of the events of 2020, that's just not possible right now. So thank you so much for your participation, your willingness to join us via webcam and so on and so forth. So my name is Rachel Slivick. I'm the social emotional consultant in Saginaw County. I work for community mental health here in Saginaw. And although my role and position has changed over the years through community mental health, I have been with the agency for 7 years. So I've been in this particular role for about 2 years now, and I absolutely love it. So again, it's my pleasure to be here with all of you today. Hannah?
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah. I'm still getting used to the Zoom communication and presenting, so please bear with us today. I am a social emotional consultant in Detroit. I'm a Detroit resident, and the city is just a huge part of who I am and why I'm here today, and I'm looking forward to sharing this space with all of you.
Hi, I'm Amber Walker. I am social emotional consultant for Kalamazoo County. I am work out of the community healing centers. So I'm here representing the west side of the state and would like to just echo everything that Megan, Rachel, and Hannah have said. We're so glad you're here. And it's so nice to see your faces, even in this strange Zoom world.
Thank you, ladies. So it's pretty obvious that over the past few months, we've had lots of examples of how the concept of race has been a really hot topic of conversation. And our goal here today is to help make that connection that between identity and specifically racial identity, how that's explicitly tied to and leads to improved outcomes for social, emotional, and mental health outcomes for the little ones that we serve and their families, and quite frankly, ourselves too. So we're going to do that today by helping you think through and reflect and hopefully think maybe a little bit differently about some things in some new ways. And we're going to preface this by saying some things might be a little bit uncomfortable or provoke some big feelings or reactions, and that's good. We want you to pay attention to those moments and to really think about that, not just in this moment, but hopefully after this as well. One of our favorite mentors in this work, Dr. Eva Marie Shivers out of Arizona, she's worked with our team over the past few years, and she likes to say that we hope to say something that rattles you a bit today. We hope to say something that you might not agree with, actually. And that's okay too, because all of that will provoke you hopefully to think more deeply about that. But our challenge that we're really offering you today and encouraging you is to not just stop with that big feeling. First, just simply to notice it and to hold it and to reflect on it again now and later as you go along throughout your day and after this. And really have it guide you forward, and really recognize that the growth and the learning, and most importantly, the change comes from these moments, to look for the learning in these moments. We also recognize that we're all starting in different places with this work, and that's okay too. You started by showing up here today, and we all have to start somewhere. So we really appreciate that and honor the fact that we're all going to think about this in some different ways, and that's what we want. We are also, the four of us are clinicians at heart, and so we recognize that if you need to take a moment and walk away, if that big feeling is just too much for that moment, that's okay too. Take care of yourself, do what you need to do, but come back, come back and continue to engage and listen to the conversation. And so with that, Evie's going to open our first poll, because again, we really just want to know who is with us today. So please take a second. It's going to be up for about 30 seconds. And again, choose the role that closely fits you. And please notice that there's an other. And if you feel like you don't quite fit into one of these boxes, put, if you feel comfortable, in the chat box what your role is if you do choose other. So again, it'll be up for a few more seconds. Take a minute. Are you a part of a childcare setting, a teacher, a parent, a home visitor, or other? Great start to quality. Great, I see an early childhood specialist. Thanks, Christina. Kimberly's a consultant, tribal social worker. Great, Dominique, thank you. Early childhood specialist. Hi, Carla, great to see you. Awesome. So thank you, Evie. It looks like about 15% are related to childcare, 4% teachers, 4% parents, 50% home visitors, 2 in the medical world, 2 from licensing, 26%, great start to quality world, and we've got quite a few others. So thank you so much. We will keep our eyes on that chat and hopefully be able to speak to whichever role that you are at. You're obviously interested and passionate, hopefully by the end of it, if you're not yet, about this work, and we'll go from there. So with that, Rachel, I think you're going to start us off this morning.
I am. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
So before we jump right into the presentation, right, what we want to do is address the elephant in the room. As you may have seen from our photos and obviously from our webcams, 2 out of 3 of us presenters, between myself, Hannah, and Amber, are white women, right? And we have no lived experience of racism. So even though we are white, we have to actively work against these systems of oppression, right? So we believe it's our responsibility to have these conversations and to do so from a growth mindset. That being said, we are not experts in the field of racial equity, right? But we want to open up these conversations. And we also know it's not only up to Black people or people of color to have and lead these discussions, which is why it's so important to us. So that being said, we feel that we have one choice, and that choice is to show up and show up imperfectly. And we know that perfection is actually the enemy of progress. And it's okay to be imperfect and to feel vulnerable. Like Megan was saying in the beginning, you know, these conversations might evoke some big feelings, and that's okay, even though it may be a little uncomfortable. And, you know, just remembering that we're constantly learning and unlearning, which is okay, as scary or as uncomfortable as it might feel for us at times. So that being said, throughout the presentation, we really encourage you to think about what brought you into this work and what brought you here today. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel like, well, I'm only one person. What can I possibly do to help? Or what can I possibly do to change what's going on in the world? It's just little old me, right? But the reality is that we can all make small changes. And if we make those small changes together and continue to have these conversations together, it will lead to a larger positive impact.
So today is all about making that connection between racial equity and social emotional health. And as we were putting this together, we wondered if that was something that you all already knew, or if even the title seemed different, or there were questions about that connection. And again, as Rachel said, we're not the experts. So while we will offer a few things, we also really want to hear from all of you, whether that's I don't know, or I'm just at the beginning of this process, or I've been thinking about this for a long time and willing to share. But what we do know is that kids are always learning about themselves. They need our help in learning about themselves. And in the same way that we teach them about feelings and all those sorts of things, and are helping their social emotional development all the time, racial equity and race are also included within that, because we all need healthy and positive racial identities to proceed. And there's definitely some equity work that we have to do in order to achieve that. So, you know, we look forward to exploring that all together today.
So I just want to share a little bit about the data and what we know. And in fact, the research is increasingly supporting what many of us do already know, which is that there's just that growing significant body of research demonstrating that the adverse health effects of racism on African Americans, there's more to it than that. It goes deeper. According to a study by Auburn University published in January of this year, encountering racism can lead to higher levels of stress, which in turn causes cells to age more rapidly. This study looked at something called telomeres, which I'm a total neuroscience geek. I love this stuff. And you can look that up for yourself if you like. But the telomeres are pieces of DNA that protect cells. And the study found a link between increased experiences with racial discrimination and the more rapid shortening of those telomeres. In other words, rapid aging, thus leading to shorter lifespan. We also know that increased chronic stress increases our risk for many physical health concerns. And this isn't just about mental health, including depression, but also migraines, heart disease, and stroke. This is a result of something called the allostatic load, or wear and tear over time, which can actually be measured with various lab tests. If racism is indeed a chronic stressor, and we all believe that it is, this adds to the load and this weathering of African Americans, especially African American women. According to research published in the Journal of National Medical Association, Black people have a higher allostatic load than white people. Addressing the factors that contribute to this will require systemic changes. Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, so if we take a closer look into that and we really get down to basics and, you know, what happens during infancy, recent studies and research has shown that we actually begin to display preferences for a certain race by 6 months old. And that fact alone hit me pretty hard because I have a 7-month-old daughter. So learning that and doing our research really was astonishing for me. Preschoolers may also begin to group themselves by race. So some examples of this would be children beginning to talk about difference in skin colors. An example of this is I have a close colleague who used to teach preschool, and she shared with me an example one day. She was helping a young Black boy color, and the child looked at her and said, "Miss Chris, your hand is a different color than mine." And even though she was taken a little bit aback by it, she said, "Yes, you're right, it is." And it opened a door to conversation. And I remember her sharing with me, "Rachel, I could not believe that at this young age, children are able to make the connection." And they absolutely are. Also in preschool, they're starting to notice difference in hair color and difference in texture. Children may also begin to play with children of similar color rather than playing with children of different racial groups. The study also found that racial or ethnic discrimination is linked to some of those things that Amber was previously talking about: poorer mental health, lower academic achievement, more engagement in risky or negative behaviors such as substance use and abuse. Then, of course, psychological, behavioral, and academic burdens posed by racial and ethnic discrimination during adolescence, when that's coupled with evidence that experiences of discrimination persist across the life course for Black people and people of color, all of these things point to discrimination as a clear contributor to the racial and ethnic disparities that we consistently are continuing to see today. There's also a very clear connection between the experience of racism and ACEs, which I'm not sure how many of you have heard of that term, but ACEs is, what that stands for is Adverse Childhood Experiences. And the idea here, or the connection that we really want to drive home, is that ACEs end in childhood, right? When you take the ACEs questionnaire, it asks you questions about childhood. However, the toxic stress of experiencing racism persists throughout a lifetime. So even though a child this young may be exposed to it, how can the healing begin, right, when the toxic stress doesn't end? So that takes us into looking at a study that was conducted in the 1940s, and it's called the Dell test. So the Dell tests were conducted in the 1940s by doctors Kenneth and Mamie Clark. I'm sure, especially with everything going on in today's day and age, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this. It's a very interesting test. We really encourage you to look more into it if you have an interest. But in short, the study was used to determine racial awareness in children. So remember, this is back in the 40s. Children between the ages of 3 and 7 were asked to identify both the race of the dolls and the color of the doll they prefer. So doctors Kenneth and Mamie Clark, their thought was, if children are aware of race and the differences in race, it will impact how they feel about themselves. So basically what they were saying is it will impact their self-concept, their values, self-esteem, and self-confidence, which we know are all at the root of social emotional health. So in looking at the results of the test, Black dolls were often chosen as the bad doll and not nice doll. Because of this, children would then be very confused oftentimes when needing to choose the doll that looked like them. So Black children often hesitated when they were asked to choose which doll looked like them because they had just picked the Black doll to be the bad doll. And they also reported that when they asked which doll looked most like themselves, some children would refuse to answer, or they would actually start crying and run out of the room entirely. So again, thinking about these tests were back in the 1940s, how is that still impacting us today, right? So again, more results. The majority of children, both Black and white, preferred the white doll overall and assigned positive characteristics to it. So doctors Kenneth and Mamie Clark actually concluded that, quote, prejudice, discrimination, and segregation created a feeling of inferiority among African American children and damaged their self-esteem. So again, these are all the root to social emotional health, and those findings of that young and that feeling of inferiority, how that impacts children as they grow to be adults. And another interesting fact before we move on to the next slide is that they actually used the findings of this particular study during the Brown versus Board of Education. And they indicated that separate was not equal and that separate was actually an injustice. And they were able to do so using the findings from this study, which I thought was incredible. So the doll study has been recreated many, many times. Multiple recreations of the original doll study test have been done. The photos that you're seeing on the screen are actual pictures used in some of the recreation studies. As you can see, they're both female and male, and the shades of skin go from very light to very dark, right? So I'm going to reference a study that was done for CNN by AC360 in 2010. The study tested 130 kids in 8 different schools. Half of the schools were in the north, half were in the south. And approximately 76% of younger white children pointed to the 2 darkest skin tones when asked who the dumb child was. And approximately 66% of the younger white children pointed to the 2 darkest skin tones when asked who the mean child was, and also when asked which skin color most children don't like. There, again, as I referenced, there are multiple recreation studies. We also researched studies that were done in 2012 and 2016. Overall, the results from all of these studies indicated that white children responded with white bias at a very high rate. So what I mean by this is lighter skin was associated with positive attributes and darker skin was more often associated with the negative attributes. So we want to take a few moments to show you some actual parent reactions while their children were participating in the recreation study. So the video we're going to show is about 2 minutes long, and after the video, I will provide a short debrief and we will watch a second reaction.
So show me the smart child. Okay, why is she the smart child?
Because she looks like me.
Okay. Show me the mean child. Okay, why is she the mean child?
Because she's way darker.
Okay. Show me the good child. Why is she the good child?
Because I think she looks like me.
Okay. Show me the bad child. Why is she the bad child?
Because she's a lot darker.
Show me the ugly child. Why is she the ugly child?
Because she's like a lot darker.
What do you think? Shocking to you?
I just think it's because she's not exposed. I mean,
You're almost near tears. Why? It's not meant to upset you. What's upsetting you?
it's not really upsetting. I mean, everything she said, she chose someone like her because she's smart, and she is.
All the good attributes. She's got a healthy ego. That looks like me. That kid's like me.
And as far as the one she chose for, being ugly or mean, I mean, you can't even see any facial features in that one. But she has never asked about any, color. As far as, when she plays with friends, and when we were talking about, we were actually going to soccer, where there's all different kinds of people there, and that's when she says, I chose the dark one as the one that was mean. I think that was an eye-opener for me, because we've never really talked about race, so we talked a long time about it.
Yeah, so that I know that I'm
Show me the smart.
the chat comments, and I appreciate everybody's participation. It is a very hurtful video. The mother admits that she's never talked about race with her child. And the video just really shows how biases can perpetuate a child's life, even when you don't talk at all about race with them. So it's a good reminder that it's up to the adults in children's lives to begin having these conversations. So we're going to show you a second video. The video is a little over a minute long. And again, following the video, I will provide a short debrief.
Show me which color looks like your skin color. Eye?
Yes.
Show me the skin color you want as your own.
I like the way I am.
And show me the skin color you believe most teachers think looks bad on a girl.
I don't think they think it matters.
They don't think it matters?
Like, it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside, it just matters what you look like on the inside.
What do you think?
She's my child. And I think, you know, her sentiments are kind of what we try to instill in both of them. You know, it's unfortunate you cannot just not accept that race is a factor in all of our lives, but, you know, you try to raise your kids as best as you can to overcome those obstacles and do the best they can as individuals, you know, and then hopefully, you know, they will be successful in whatever it is that they choose to do. But, you know, again, you cannot get away from the fact that race is a factor. But, you know, hopefully what we instill in them at home will help them to, you know, put that in its right place and move on.
So we see here a complete 180 from the first video, right? We see a father speaking to the fact that race is a factor in all of our lives, and the idea that we must instill in our children and the children and families that we serve love and acceptance regardless of skin tone and skin color, right? So after watching those two parents' reactions, we'd really like to hear what you are all thinking. What feeling words arise in you after watching these clips? And I think we're actually going to break from the PowerPoint and come into, yeah, here we go, discussion view to make it feel more like we're actually in person. And we just encourage you to throw some feeling words and how you're feeling. Hurtful. Frustrated. Sad. Shocked. Hopeful. Heartbroken. A lot of negative emotions. I'm intrigued by the Michelle. Your response was hopeful. Would you mind speaking a little more to that? More work to be done. Absolutely, Amy. I'm definitely in agreement. I believe we all are.
I was also, something that I was thinking about was the confidence of the second little girl to kind of reject a lot of messages she probably is told and, you know, listen to the one that her dad gave her, that it doesn't matter. And I was thinking, honestly, at that age, I don't know that that is the level of confidence. I mean, I felt a lot of different feelings, you know, both joy that she was so confident and had her values, and also just kind of like, wow, how did she get there? And knowing all that work that takes. And also to be able to have that conversation with adults, to tell an adult what she believes. There's a lot kind of going on in that second video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I can, you know, something that a couple people have spoken to in the chat is you know, the Black family, and at least from my learnings and research, is that Black families have these conversations with their kids because they have to have these conversations with their kids. And generally it's, as I've learned and heard, it's about safety and how do you show up in the world and how do you act in the world, and it's about surviving and keeping yourself safe. And myself, again, with my 3 little kids, we had the convenience and the privilege of not having to have those conversations out of a sense of safety and survival at such an early age. And you know, again, we're hopeful that these conversations today don't just spark thoughts and wonderings about what's, you know, the families that you work with and that you serve, but also your own families, and how you can begin to have these conversations with your own children. And that's how we can feel like the load and the burden, again, as I think Rachel said at the beginning, it's not, the burden is not just on families of color to have these conversations. It's on us as white women and white families as well.
And I see that someone brought up that this is also a safety measure. And I really like that safety is being brought into this because I know that's a value we all share for children and families. And someone else is kind of bringing up exposure. And so I really think no matter the demographics of your center, it's such an important conversation, and children are deducing things, and also what are the impacts of children growing up in homogeneous environments where everything is the same. And what values are they deducing about that? So again, just kind of wanted to talk about the exposure, and really no matter the racial breakdown of your center or where you work or the kids you work with, this is important work. And that just might shift kind of what you talk about or how you talk about or what's most important to talk about.
Hannah, I love that you bring up that point. Because as, again, I shared with you earlier that I have a 7-month-old daughter, and watching this video, both of these videos really impacted me and made me realize that I have some work to do in regards to my parenting. And what I mean by that is being very intentional on the dolls that I buy her. Are they culturally inclusive? Or am I just buying her dolls that look like us? The stories that I read her, just things of that nature that can really start to build her capacity for racial equity and racial awareness and inclusivity now, so that, again, we can work against these systems of oppression that have been instilled in our culture and in America, right, for so long. We really, really appreciate all of your responses. I'm looking at all of them. I've seen some personal stories. Thank you all so much for sharing those. Please know you are not alone in how you're feeling. You know, we realize that there's a lot of work to do. But again, going back to the beginning of the presentation, if we all make small changes together, we can make progress, right? Well, thank you all so much for sharing.
All right, so I don't know about you, but I feel like always when I watch these videos, I need to just sort of take a deep breath and sort of calm, like I'm having an emotional response. And so I always just need to take like a deep breath and just like get my mind straight again, because they are upsetting. And that's why we're having this conversation, so that we, first of all, understand the relationship, and that there is a relationship, whether you're having the conversation or not, and hopefully what we can do about it. So we'll get there. I want to give you some hope that we do end this presentation with some ideas and strategies, and I'm so appreciative of everyone sharing in the chat box. It really helps with this format. We know that this can lead to some long-term mental health concerns, of course, because as you can see, kids are getting lots of negative feedback through childhood and adolescence. This can also lead to, like I talked about before, a higher risk of illness and early death. The most positive outcomes in our society happen when we have holistic identities and systems of accountability to be able to navigate when harm is done, which begins in childhood. Like when we're angry and we take the toy from our friend, we teach them what to do and how to handle those big feelings. This is very similar. Doing this work leads to healing, not perpetuating trauma, ending historical trauma, and us interrupting cycles that have been going on for so long. It frees us from this system. If we care about it in the classroom, we need to also care about it in the greater society. We know that a healthy classroom environment benefits children, and if we can take that into the greater community, we then build a more resilient community. Oh, there we go. So bias, let's talk a little bit about what this looks like. There's some definitions on your screen. Bias can be either conscious or unconscious. We don't have to know that it's going on in order for it to occur. It can lead to verbal and physical harassment, harming those of another race, or bullying because of skin color. It can even be something as simple as like not including someone because of their skin color. I'm thinking specifically of a situation where there's only one little Black girl in the class, and sometimes she has a hard time finding people to play with because it's preschool and she doesn't look like anybody else, which is so sad. Addressing these biases can lead to increased awareness, which research shows leads to better quality care. Because we're not aware of our bias, it happens automatically. Things like, you know, it could be another example of just thinking that all pit bulls are mean. Like we have these categories in our brain and we have shortcuts as well. So I'm going to do a little riddle that really kind of plays with our, I love riddles because it really teaches us how our brains work. So the riddle is, a father and son get into a car accident and are both very badly hurt. They are taken each to a separate hospital. When the boy is taken in for his operation, the surgeon says, I cannot do this surgery. This is my son. How is this possible? So if you have a guess, you can put it in the chat box. Yes, if you've heard it, stay quiet because you know. And it plays with our biases a little. Oh, you guys are so smart. It's his mom. Yes, yes. The first time I heard this riddle, I really struggled. And it just talked to my own biases, which is that even though rationally I know that a woman can be a surgeon, I thought, well, maybe he has two dads. Like maybe he's adopted or he's in foster care. Like it really messed with my head a little bit because it revealed my own biases. We as human beings, our brains are doing so many things unconsciously. We're categorizing things all the time. Our brains are literally processing millions of pieces of information every second. From the temperature in the room, to the lighting, to the colors, to the noises, to internal processes like hormones and hunger and fatigue. All those things are going on unconsciously, and our brain has to develop shortcuts in order to function. If we had to consciously process every piece of information that came through, we'd just become catatonic. It's too much. So our brains develop these shortcuts, and one of these things is categorization, and we label particular attributes to these categories. When we're little, we're learning what's a dog, what's a cat, what's a cow, what's a horse. And as adults, we know these are 4 different things. They're all furry animals with 4 legs. And when we're little, we might get those confused. But eventually we learn all these different categories. And we do the same thing with people. It's just how our brains function. So we have to outsmart ourselves and bypass these shortcuts. And we do this by becoming more able to recognize or other parent, regardless of gender identity. Yes, that was my first one. I was like, well, maybe he has 2 dads. What do we know? We're outsmarting ourselves and bypassing those shortcuts. And so in order to do that, we have to become aware of our own biases to address them. All right, I think I covered it, yeah.
Yeah, so thinking about what Amber was just talking about in regards to biases, we wanted to give you a little perspective from a Black mother's experience. She has, well, at this time, they're a little older, but at the time she wrote her book, she has a young son and a young daughter. Both are Black children. So there's 3 quotes, and I'm going to kind of talk about each quote individually. So the first quote Her son was labeled disruptive in the classroom for shouting out an answer in class. So this kind of struck her because this wasn't like her son. So when she asked him about it later, he said that he had raised his hand, but the teacher did not call on him. So he just set out the answer while his hand was still in the air because he was so excited to learn. He was so excited that he had the answer and he wanted to share it. But again, he was labeled disruptive. So she also found out that when his white classmate Peter shouted out answers in the class, he was described as, quote, eager. Austin also stated that her son's white teachers could, or she felt that his son's white teachers could better relate to Peter for reasons such as he reminded them of their brothers and fathers, which revealed their unconscious biases, which again, Amber did a beautiful job explaining what those are. So in the second quote, she talks about how the school began to actually educate their faculty about microaggressions. What is a microaggression and how can they come out in everyday curriculum that's being taught to the children at their school. And the faculty actually were encouraged to begin exploring their own unconscious biases. And what I thought was absolutely amazing that she shared was that this school actually began to incorporate more inclusive images and narratives in the curriculum to really speak to all different cultures rather than just white culture. So in the third quote, Austin writes about her young daughter, and she writes about how she teaches her daughter how to, quote, carry herself with class and dress age appropriately because Black girls were overly sexualized at a young age and vulnerable to rape and human trafficking. So Austin prepares her daughter to, quote, take pride in her brown skin, kinky curly hair, and dark brown eyes. And she did this by buying her dolls and other toys that looked like her, right? So the author begins to build her daughter's self-esteem and self-confidence at a very young age. But she also begins preparing her daughter for the reality of biases and racism in our country. So we know that how a child views race and differences in race impacts their lives in many ways, right? We talked about the research that supports that. So what the author is doing is assisting her children in building positive racial identities at a very young age, which again, leads to things like higher self-esteem, higher self-confidence, all the things we've talked about previously that will have a positive impact on the social and emotional well-being of her children.
All right, so we're also going to get into a little bit of the foundation of structural racism and bias, and also the defensiveness that can pop up when doing this work. And so we're going to do a little bit of a self-reflection activity, another poll, and also just kind of confronting how we do deal with our biases and potential areas for growth. And so the poll question is, when did you first begin to understand your own racial identity? And all answers are okay. And I do want to acknowledge that people are talking about colorism in the chat, and I'm really glad that you all have brought that up. I'm actually wishing we had more time together because everyone is so awesome and contributing so many great ideas. Okay, does everybody see the results? Okay. Is it possible for us to come back together a little bit and kind of share how we're feeling about that? It looks like the majority of people feel like they became aware of it between 6 and 12. Although I would argue you might have been aware before and just can't remember it. some people are unsure.
Hannah, I've stopped the presentation for now so that we can come together as requested.
Thank you. And again, we're also kind of wondering, what feelings popped up. Any feelings of discomfort, guilt, embarrassment. Again, we're just trying to kind of point out the big feelings that can pop up when we begin to think about these things and our own history and what kids are experiencing, so we can know those feelings, manage them, and continue doing this work and addressing equity in all your work settings. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing?
I can share.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kayla. I have a multitude of roles. I'm a project manager at Great Start Lane, and I'm a psychologist. I work with children and families with an infant mental health background, too. For me, the feelings are really heavy. I'm sitting here with my mixed race daughter who's doing her homework, trying to make sure that she's not overhearing the videos and things like that, because I'm not entirely ready to have that conversation in this very moment with her, but preparing myself to be able to do that. I find myself regularly fighting off a helplessness by recognizing that if I'm ever like not sure what to do, I can just work on unlearning things and relearning things. But the helplessness and the sorrow that comes with it is there's a clawing away from it that has to occur pretty regularly. So it's just heavy.
And you have to address, it's really easy to get stuck there. Helplessness and hopelessness are huge, and honestly really huge right now. And it takes a lot of effort to re-engage when those are the primary feelings. And I think with all the information that's being shared today and the videos and our own personal experiences, we all know we need to keep engaging. Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
So I'm an African-American woman. And for me, I chose between birth and 5 because from the earliest ages, I've had to learn how to navigate 2 different communities. I come from a small town and it's right on the border of 2 states. And so I would go to school and live in one community, and then my church would be in another community. And even though they were very close geographically, demographically, they were very, very different. So having to go to school and being, the only Black child in the classroom, it was really like kind of learning how to navigate, 2 worlds. And there were always conversations about safety and, protecting yourself from our family. So it's something that I've always been very much aware of.
Yeah, and because of how segregated communities continue to be, so many children are navigating that. And that's a really important thing to be aware of. As a child, you're working with navigating a dual environment. Are they worried about passing? Are they worried about how to act, how to be? It can be very, very stressful for a young child to be taking in all the rules that we do have in our society, and just trying to make sure they're doing the right thing for either safety, confidence, self-esteem, all of that. Thanks, Amanda.
I have a very vivid memory when I was in 1st grade, and my 1st grade teacher would always let us out late. And so my dad was tired of me and my 4 sisters coming home late because we always had to come home together. So he decided to go just talk to the teacher. And mind you, this was in the 70s, and we were probably the first or the second Black family in our area. And I vividly remember my teacher, Miss Seymour, breaking out into tears because my dad went to talk to her. And that was just like, wow. He just, he wasn't angry, and he just wanted to find out why we were coming home late. and she actually started crying. So after that, I never stayed out late. She actually let me out early.
And you know, we're talking about such a spectrum of feelings. I think we need to keep going, but I just wanted to say that whether your answer was I knew from an early age, or it took me longer, or I'm unsure, kind of wherever you are at, there's a feeling there, and if we can know it, then we can move forward, because I think there's also a lot of negative experiences, and so while someone might have guilt and shame about not knowing what to do, or they haven't experienced it, for those of us that have experienced harm and racial trauma, there's healing that needs to be done too, so we don't stay stuck there, and we can continue to move our communities and the larger community forward as well. And so I think, you know, there's so much healing all around. No matter where you fall, there's a lot of holding to do. And again, it's an active process. So this is kind of a discussion that I feel like is really current right now, kind of the anti-racism movement. We actually don't really get the privilege of saying we're not racist, because it's the kind of thing that's in the water. It's permeating. It's the elephant in the room. We come from a racist history. And so change is an active, conscious process. So being anti-racist results from a conscious decision to make frequent, consistent, equitable choices daily. These choices require ongoing self-awareness and self-reflection as we move through life. In the absence of making anti-racist choices, we unconsciously or consciously uphold aspects of white supremacy, white dominant culture, and unequal institutions in society. And then we have an image here that says, self-reflection is only useful when followed by thoughtful action. And again, we're in a place where this really needs to be a conscious effort. Just hoping we're getting it right, or hoping we're not doing harm, is not working, because it just permeates everything and it's in our structures. And okay, and so this is a really, really great slide, and we really encourage you to take a look at this. There's a lot of information on it, and we wanted to include an illustration of how implicit bias is connected to structural racism. And again, we encourage you to review this on your own and research it, but the main idea here is that historical policies have led to racial disparities, which in turn leads people to make assumptions about people of color. A primary assumption, conscious or unconscious, being that Black people are inferior to white people. And so white people consciously and unconsciously make harmful assumptions about people of color. And this can also happen amongst non-Black communities of color as well. But it's all just reinforcing itself, and it's on this cyclical cycle, and we kind of have to acknowledge our biases and find some place to intersect it, acknowledge it's happened, and stop it and veer off. I wanted to give a little space in case any of my co-presenters wanted to add anything after those slides, or with everything that we've heard from everyone.
Yeah, Hannah, I'm just going to kind of piggyback off what you said. There is a lot of content on this slide, but I think it does a really great job of illustrating how we as a society, and how Black people and people of color are still impacted to this day by policies and legislation that was in place when slavery was legal. Right, so like Hannah said, we really encourage you to, if you're interested, take a deeper look at this slide. It is connected to a study. We did put that on there so that you're able to look further into that. But we thought that it was a really great illustration of how it is all related. So thanks for sharing that.
Thanks. And I mean, I think we're ready for the next slide. I just want to acknowledge that I'm trying to keep up with this awesome chat box. I wish I could read what everyone was saying. I hope everyone's kind of getting a chance to look through it. And I just wanted to say, you know, I hear you and I see you, to everyone in here, even if I'm not able to read it out loud right now. Thank you.
Hannah,
Yeah,
real quick.
Go ahead, Megan.
Sorry, this made me think of Hannah, you were saying in terms of an analogy a little bit ago, and as I was going through and doing my own work, I heard this analogy of people are used to, I think, thinking that being racist is like being the shark. Like there's one person who's very racist and, you know, they do lots of conscious things about that. But we're learning that really racism is the ocean, and it's something we're all swimming in, and we didn't create the ocean, but we are swimming in it. And so before we jump to talking about defense mechanisms, I think that's important to keep it in our head, and also too in thinking about, just as Hannah was saying and Rachel were saying on the previous slide about all of the structural pieces that I wasn't really aware of at all, in terms of laws and regulations and all of these structural pieces that we obviously didn't create, but we are definitely a part of. And so that analogy was very striking for me, so I wanted to share that. All right, thanks. Go for it, Amber.
Yes, so one of the things that I personally have really had to unpack is this idea of, well, I can't be racist, like I'm a good person. And good people aren't racist. And really unpacking this idea, and because defensiveness inhibits growth, and we really look at this as a growth mindset. And this is a hard thing to do. And there's a TED Talk, and his name is Jay Smooth, and I want to encourage all of you to go and watch it, because it completely changed my perspective on having conversations about race, where he compares it to, like, it's not a dichotomy of you're a good person or a bad person. It's this idea of like being a clean person. Jay Smooth is his name, which is a great name, honestly. And he's like, if someone points out to you that you have some food stuck in your teeth, you don't say, well, I can't have food stuck in my teeth, I'm a clean person. It's something we have to continually work on, because we live in this society where racism sort of builds up like plaque on our teeth. And so he compares it to dental hygiene as opposed to being a good or bad person. I'm seeing lots of people, thank you, Megan. I'm seeing lots of people in the chat that have to leave. So glad you could join us. And yes, there will be a recording available. So defensiveness, we have to kind of work through that and set this growth mindset of I'm learning to do better. Some of the things that we will often resort to saying is, oh, I can't be racist. I have Black friends. These are some examples. I don't see color. I didn't do this to you. I never had slaves. All these things shut down conversation, because all it does is discharge discomfort, and it doesn't lead us to really examine what's going on. But not all white people are racist. That's in the past. I didn't mean to. You misunderstood me, or that's not what I meant. We really have to acknowledge that this is hard, because someone's pointing out something we're unaware of. And we have to look at, yes, my cousin's married to a Black guy. I can't be racist. Intent versus impact. Just because you didn't intend to be hurtful doesn't mean you weren't hurtful. We teach this to the children in our care, right? If you're 2 and someone takes your toy, because we haven't learned cooperative play yet, they take your toy and you hit them and they cry, there's a lot of impact there, right? Was the intent for the 2-year-old to hurt their friend? No, but that doesn't mean they didn't hurt them. And so we teach them to have these conversations and to engage in those pro-social behaviors. And we have to do the same thing with race. We have to learn to talk about it, and we have to understand that our intent and our impact are not the same thing. So what can I say instead? After acknowledging them, saying, wow, I'm so sorry. I acknowledge them, focus on the feeling that you're experiencing rather than focusing on your next move. I recognize that I have work to do. I'm going to take some time to reflect on this. I appreciate the labor you've put in, because when you say something hurtful, even if you don't mean for it to be hurtful, that person takes it in, is impacted by your statement, and then processes through not only their own feelings about it, but what they're going to do and what that impact might be. So if I were to say something, a microaggression, and I'm going to pick on Hannah a little bit, and Hannah were to be impacted by that and to realize that that was really hurtful, and she came to me and said, you may not realize this, but what you said was racist. She really has to work through all of her feelings and how she's going to handle that, and think about, like, what do I do now? And it takes that labor, that's emotional labor, for her to come to me and say, hey, we need to talk about this. And then I should say something along the lines of, I apologize, I'm going to do better. Or maybe even, I want to make this right. If, and this is a caveat, if you have the energy or time, please let me know if there's something I could do. Because they might not. They might say, you know what, go Google it. I don't know what to tell you. And that's fine too. What I'm gathering is, and then fill in what you've learned. I believe you. This is a really important one. I believe you. I never thought about that before. Thank you for pointing it out. I will work on it. We just have to be able to sit with the discomfort instead of deflecting blame by becoming defensive. We must do all of these things sincerely and not in a way that is trying to like show what a good white person I am, or like I'm one of the good ones. I'm not racist. No, we all have it. We just have to accept it and try to do better. Modeling, also this is modeling for not only our coworkers, but the children in our care and the people around us. When they see us do these things, that's how they learn. If you think about the kid on the playground, right? That social referencing who falls and they're not really hurt, but they look around to see how their caregiver is responding. If the caregiver is like, oh no, are you okay? And scoops them up, the kid might cry. But if the caregiver sort of like sits back and is calm and says, you good? They're like, yeah, I'm good. And then they keep playing. It's a very similar idea. They're looking to us. So even though having these conversations is not on our job description, it is absolutely a part of our job. Even if we didn't think this is what we signed up for, it is what we signed up for. And then finally, just as another example, if you think about that child in your care who's maybe an only child, they don't have any brothers or sisters at home. They kind of run the show at home. Everyone sort of waits on them. We all know this kid, right? They do exist. I've met them. They do exist. And then they come to daycare or childcare and they have to like follow a schedule. And what do you mean I can't get a snack whenever I want? Well, I'm bored with your morning meeting. I'm going to go play and, I'm going to go play house. And they have to learn that this is not okay, that there are rules we have to follow. And then the child maybe has a tantrum. So to me, it's a very similar dynamic to when white people realize, hey, other people's feelings matter and it's not all about me. And what do you mean what I say is hurtful? What do you mean I'm racist? And we have a little fit, maybe, hopefully not, but we learn to work through it. And we learn that this is part of being in community with others. It's not all about us. It is about everyone. And so we may act, that child who's spoiled may act as if they feel like they're being oppressed, but what it really is they're learning that other people's thoughts and desires and feelings also matter.
And I just wanted to quickly add that defensiveness can also pop up because depending on your identities, you do benefit from these structures. And so as we're beginning to understand how we benefit or do not benefit off of inequity, a lot of defensiveness can pop up around that as well. And that's normal.
Thank you for pointing that out, Hannah.
Needs to be worked through. Yeah, it just came to me because Megan had mentioned, when you mentioned the ocean, I had been like, and we also live off that. Like, you have to drink, and it's like, it might benefit some fish and not other, and just thinking again, the process of undoing benefits that are from the harm of others. And that process, and a lot of big emotions and defensiveness can pop up around that too. But as we can see, this is incredibly laborious. It is hard for adults to do. We are still learning in it. Believe it or not, kids are managing this labor as well. I think we've heard some examples today out loud and in the chat flood about how children of all ages are managing this really stressful topic that we ourselves as the adults are stressed by. And so what does that mean for the children that we all work with and the families we care about? How are we aiding in that process? How are we modeling? How do we build a healthy, positive racial identity capacity for children and families? And we're looking forward to hearing your ideas about that. But again, I just want to emphasize that as we're talking about this and so many hard feelings are coming up, these are feelings that children are growing into and coming into. and we talk to them about other hard experiences. And so this also needs to be in the conversation as well. It just can't be left out. So we're interested in hearing from you. If you can fill into the chat, what are you kind of doing with this information? Do you have any ideas and strategies that you have already done? Also, is the feeling like, I don't know yet? Again, I'm new to this. We really want the chat to be kind of a safe place for wherever you are. It's okay to name it. But again, we're not the experts, and we've got tons of awesome professionals in this Zoom room today. So we would love to hear a little bit from you, and then we'll go on to offer some stuff, hopefully in a perfect 20 minutes. So again, how is diversity currently being used in your work setting or childcare setting or home? How is it being presented? Again, it's okay to say, I don't know. Is it being used in a way that accidentally reinforces stereotypes? One thing that we were thinking about that is being really conscious if you're doing feeling faces. There are certain feelings that are negatively associated with certain people, or if you have an angry face and it's an image of a little Black girl, that could be reinforcing a stereotype that we need to be conscious of. And also, it's okay to make mistakes as long as you are part of an environment where someone can say something. It's safe to say something, whether it's a child, a parent, you yourself, because we're practicing in this, and a huge piece of it is that being okay and having a place where people can speak up if they see something that needs correcting. You see, trying to think of ideas for your daughter. Let's see. Any ideas?
We actually have a slide for that coming up. We'll be talking about several books. So I'm glad that that question came up. Thank you.
In the interest of time, we can keep going, and maybe we'll come up with some ideas together.
Yeah, absolutely. And please, if you have ideas, book ideas, anything like that, please feel free to put them in the chat so that everybody else can look at that and write them down and research that as well. So we are running short on time. We have a lot more content left. This has been such a great discussion. I'm going to quickly go through this slide. Know that there are literally hundreds of resources and strategies you can use. We've only chosen to highlight a few. So when speaking and working with children about how to use an anti-bias approach, remember to try not to jump to conclusions. Young children I'm sorry, what was that? I'm sorry, I thought somebody was speaking. Young children tend to be very literal, and adults often read more into their words than intended. So just a quick example, a white child may refer to a Black child as dirty, right? An adult may jump to the conclusion and think that they're referring to the child by the color of their skin. But in reality, the white child actually saw the other child playing in a mud puddle earlier and think that they're actually dirty because they played in that mud puddle, right? So adults who are eager to have these conversations, they're more aware of these things. And so they might be more eager to confront these biases because they see teachable moments. But we have to remember, commenting right away on that would actually signal anxiety about race. So just remembering to not jump to conclusions. Another one is just to look for subtle cues, right? Children express themselves verbally or non-verbally. So older preschool children might have the verbal skills to talk about these things, but toddlers might just point to somebody that looks differently or touch somebody's hair that's a different texture, right? Take these signs as invitations to scaffold their learning and to help them appreciate others. And the other big takeaway from this slide is just to really adapt to the age group, right? Classes with infants and toddlers need very different lessons and explanations than classes with 4-year-olds. So take time to think through the topics and conversations that you might have with children prior to actually having them, which allows you to choose the concepts carefully.
So yes, there are lots and lots of ways to help kids. I just want to highlight, we'll talk a little more about resources, but I'm going to actually skim through this pretty quickly. So I want to make sure that you have the link, and that website is embracerace.org, all one word. And they have done so much good work around this topic and having conversations about things like colorism, bias, prejudice, all of those really great things. And that's actually where we took these few slides from, because they're so thorough and they have such a variety, and they do include younger children in their interventions, but suggestions as well. So things like starting early, like kids notice differences. That's okay. Just be sure to involve yourself thoughtfully in that conversation. Making space for your child's respectful curiosity. Kids are still learning about the world. And like Rachel said, you know, maybe a mud puddle, just asking questions, what do you mean they're dirty? And getting more information from them on that. And that it's okay to ask questions and react. If your child makes a negative racial comment, asking non-judgmentally, what makes you say that? To just have that conversation again, like not getting embarrassed and shutting down the conversation, but opening it up. Using age-appropriate language, someone mentioned in the chat box, using the idea of fairness versus unfairness, that's very helpful. Letting your kids see you do your own work. Again, that modeling of like talking about your own feelings, facing your own biases, acknowledging when you don't know an answer to a question, and then doing the research and letting your child see that it's okay not to know, and that it's okay to learn. And again, that my Aunt Angelou quote, when you know better, you do better. And that's the whole point of this. Some other things we can do is to learn about others and yourself by choosing diversity. Choose a diverse neighborhood to live in, a school for your child, the books, the toys, like Rachel had said. When I was growing up, diverse books were a huge part of my life. I grew up in this really white rural town that was 15 minutes away from Kalamazoo. So I kind of had both sides of it, but I grew up with very diverse books, and it really helped me to see that there's no single story, that no group of people is a monolith, and that's so important. Learning about and respecting others, that there's more diversity within groups than across them. We're all different, we're all special, we're all unique, we're all lovely. Making sure that stories include explorations about race, and knowing and loving who you are, doing some family history, understanding where you came from is also important. Nurturing critical thinking, that's just across the board. Helping kids to think critically about everything is super helpful. Nurturing, supporting your kids to take a stand. And then remember that this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. It's a lifelong journey, and we have to pace ourselves, and it's okay to take a step back and take a breath and understand that this is hard work. All right, I went through that really quickly, but I want to just say, like, embracerace.org has some fantastic resources, and that's exactly where I pulled that from. So you can get more information there.
Yes, I agree with Amber. Embracerace.org is an absolutely wonderful resource, and we certainly encourage you all to utilize that. So here, to address the question of some books, these are just some books that I have in my personal library that I wanted to share with you because I use them often, enjoy them. We know that, especially when working with young children, books can be used for a variety of reasons. But in this case, it can be used as a tool to help increase positive racial identities. And also know that books can be used with adults too. So the first Sesame Street book, We're Different, We're the Same, it describes how everything about us is different. So we have different hair, different bodies, different feelings. But we're the same in that our hair grows in several places and keeps our head warm, and our bodies, although they might look different, we all need food and water and rest, and we might be experiencing different feelings at different times, but we all experience the same feelings, but not at the same time. So it really celebrates diversity by describing how fun it is to be different. I Love My Hair is a story about a young Black girl who doesn't like getting her hair combed at night. It's hot, it hurts, but it's a story about how she comes to accept her hair as a part of her identity as a young Black girl. I really love that story and using that story. Whoever you are, This explains that there are children all over the world. In every part of the world, there's children. They may not look alike, live alike, or learn alike, but they all experience joy, sorrow, love, pain. And although it emphasizes how alike we are, it also celebrates the diversity of cultures, which I really appreciate. And then finally, and again, this is not the end all of different books you can use. These are just ideas of where you can start with the children in your care. The last one we chose to talk about is A Rainbow of Friends. And this emphasizes that all friends are special in their own way. And it shows that the back cover actually quotes, "It shows that when we celebrate the uniqueness of others, our lives are enriched and the world is a better place for us all." And I think that is absolutely true. So in short, right, we have a quote here from the author we spoke about earlier. The author makes note that we must do our homework and become culturally competent about our children's heritage or the children that we serve. We should all seek to build community with one another in order to become true allies for inclusivity, which again, as always, we can relate this back to the idea that if we all become more culturally competent about the children and families that we serve, then we will better meet their needs in terms of social emotional development.
So we have 10 minutes left, which is perfect. I can absolutely do this in 10 minutes. I want everyone to just take I want everyone to take a nice deep breath. And just remembering those ground rules and those caveats from the beginning. This is a hard conversation to have. And you may even be feeling more uncomfortable at the end than you did at the beginning of this presentation, and that's okay. That's normal. This is the beginning point to having those new and open conversations with each other, the staff you are working with, and the children and families that you serve. So I want you just to think about your own support systems, and maybe on a piece of paper off to the side, just jot a few things down. I want you to think about your own support systems. Who can you continue these conversations with to help you feel more comfortable when addressing these topics with the children and families that you serve? I want to encourage you to do some research and have those conversations. The Michigan League for Public Policy is a really great resource as well. I don't think that made it into our slides, but they have a 21-day challenge that I would encourage. If you want to do more work on this, this is a great place to start. And you will have a dearth of information to learn, and it's a really good starting point. It breaks it down into little nuggets. So think a little bit about self-care. What are those things that you can do if you walk away from this webinar and you're feeling some kind of way? And I just want you to think of some things you could do to bring yourself back. I am going to do a very short mindfulness reading. It takes about a minute on some self-compassion, because maybe in this conversation you realize the resource for the 21-day challenge is the Michigan League. Yes, the Michigan League for Public Policy. Megan's got the link in the chat. Thank you. So I just want you to take a moment and sit comfortably. And you can open your eyes, you can close them, whatever is more comfortable for you. And this is from Kristen Neff's self-compassion website. And I just want you to think of this conversation and just say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. That's mindfulness. Maybe this hurts, or ouch, or this is stress. Suffering is a part of life. That's common humanity. Other people feel this way. You are not alone. We all struggle in our lives. I want you to put your hands over your heart. Feel the warmth, or maybe the coolness, of your hands and the gentle touch of your hands on your chest. Say to yourself, may I be kind to myself. May I give myself the compassion that I need. May I learn to accept myself as I am. May I forgive myself. May I be strong. May I be patient. Take another big breath. And you can open your eyes if you've closed them, and just remember that if our compassion does not include ourselves, it is incomplete. On the next slide, you'll see some additional resources. Some we have already mentioned, such as embracerace.org. 0 to 3 is also a fantastic one, NAACP-LDF.org. And we also have a citation for the book that Rachel shared, Motherhood So White. And I see some people have put in the chat what they plan on doing for self-care, which is lovely. You do not have to do that, but if you want some accountability, that can be good too. Sometimes when we speak it out loud, it's more likely to happen. And then we have a short video. In fact, someone mentioned this book, and we are going to end on this, and we'll have some closing comments. This book is called Skin Like Mine, and it's from a YouTube channel called I can't remember it. I'm gonna butcher it if I try to say it, but the entire YouTube channel is narrated by a Black woman, which I think is so important. So we're going to watch this video, and then we'll have some closing remarks. About just shy of 3 minutes.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of Sankofa Read Aloud. Today's story is titled Skin Like Mine, written by Latasha M. Perry, illustrated by Bea Jackson. I hope that you enjoy this amazing story. Skin Like Mine is quite divine. In fact, I'd say it's one of a kind. I wouldn't trade for any other shade. I love my brown skin. Oh, where do I begin? My sister and I are both shades of brown. Me like peanut butter, and she a hazelnut spread, both creamy and smooth. If I had to choose, it'd be hard for me because both are so yummy. Skin Like Mine is really neat, sort of like a brownie treat. Dark chocolate brown, so tasty and sweet. I love my skin from my head to my feet. When I look at Grandpa's skin, you know what comes to mind? Caramel, that's it. A touch of golden brown drizzled on top of your ice cream. Ooh wee! This is making my tummy hungry. My best bud in the whole world, Sean, we are like cookies and cream. When we're together, our skin color doesn't mean a thing because we know it's what's inside that matters the most. Color should never keep two people from being close. Imagine a world with one hue of colors. How boring that would be. I don't know about you, but I like variety. Like a bag of lollipops, each bringing a different splash of flavor to my mouth. If everyone was the same, wouldn't that be a shame? Skin like mine is quite divine. In fact, I'd say it's one of a kind. I wouldn't trade for any other shade. I love my skin. Oh, how I love my brown skin.
Thank you, Evie. So ladies, we have 2 minutes, perfect timing as always. Again, I just wanted to say thank you for all of you for sharing, for taking the chance and being vulnerable, even in this virtual space where many of us don't even know each other very well, but hopefully you feel a sense of connection and we were able to communicate that as well as we could through this platform. So we really appreciate your time today and for all that you do for all the kids and families that you work with. And again, we hope that we made that explicit connection between racial identity, and social emotional health for your kids and for you and for your families. And again, offer that challenge of whatever big feelings were evoked today to notice them and sit with them, but don't stay there and do what you need to do to move forward and take some action and whatever that looks like in whatever your sphere of influence looks like in your lives. So we appreciate you so much. And again, Amber, Rachel, and Hannah, just thank you so much. You guys are fantastic. And to ECIC, Jennifer and Evie, thank you. We have one more ask of you. We're not going to do a formal evaluation, but Evie's going to pull up one more poll. So if you, and we're not going to show these results, so feel free to be brutally honest. So there are 4 questions in the poll, and then as you do that, I'm going to write 2 more questions in the chat. One being, what's one takeaway that each of you have from this presentation? And then also one thing that could make this better, because we are all open, and with that growth mindset that we talked about, we want to model that. So we want to make this as welcoming and informational as we can. So again, in just a second, there it is. Thank you, Evie. And as you take the poll, I will be typing the chat in the box. We also have our email addresses on this last slide, and you will be getting, in some way, these slides will be available. I'm not quite sure, Evie or Jennifer, if you can speak to how they can get those, but we will make those available. And again, have a wonderful day. Take good care of yourselves. Thank you.
We will be happy to email the presentation after the webinar has concluded today, and just want to remind everyone that this is a 4-question poll, so please be sure to scroll to the bottom to be able to provide feedback to our amazing presenters on today's presentation. Also, once you've concluded the poll, if there are no further questions, you are free to leave the presentation. And so on behalf of the Investment Corporation and our partners at Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, we thank you again for joining us and for contributing to this very rich conversation. And we hope to keep the conversation going. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
I just noticed your comment. Thanks, Jessica. And if feel free to add, either answer those questions or add whatever debrief that you want to in the chat. We're going to save it. We're going to talk about it. And we ourselves are going to process everything, all the feedback that you have for us. So thank you.
I agree. More time in small groups or debriefing would have been great, because everyone offered so many great things.
It's just too big of a topic for an hour and a half.
It just goes back to the idea that it would be so much nicer to have time to do this in person. I truly believe that we could easily make a one-day training out of this topic and really get discussion and involvement.
Yeah, it's a full day topic for sure.
Yeah.
Evie, let's put it on the schedule for summer of 2021. How about that?
Yes.
Absolutely. We would love to host that.
You know, a lot of these conversations are being had, and I'm hearing kind of going well, and people want to have them again. And
yep.
So folks, for those of you that are finished providing feedback, again, thank you for your participation today, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Feel free to leave the meeting. Thank you.